Well, I think what we'll do is we'll get started. If people roll in, they can roll in. Hi, everybody. My name's Charlie Tavy. I am the CEO of Year On. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have people in here who are already deposited students. We have some people who are still thinking about it. So, you know, there is a blend. No question is off the books. Grace has actually done one of these for us in person. We had a group of counselors come. And I always ask fellows to be very candid. So Grace, please continue to be candid tonight. But thanks everybody for joining us wherever you are, East Coast, West Coast, in the middle. What we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna field any questions that any of you might have about the Year On program. I'm gonna just have Grace and Deb do some introductions first, but first I just want to call out some of the functions on Zoom. So if you are not right now, we are going to mute all of you just so we can make sure that we don't have any background noise. But if you want to, you can see down on the bottom right next to stop video, it says mute. If you hit that, that'd be great for us. And then if you slide over a bit, you'll see that there is a chat function. Right there in that group chat, if you can see if you have a question, and that's while Grace and Deb are talking, feel free to put that question in there, and then we will just, I will try and moderate and just collect all of the questions in case there's some redundancy or I can build off of something that I feel like is going to come up. If you feel like, oh, I want to ask this question, but I don't want to know everyone is knowing that I'm asking the question, in that chat box right next to it says to everyone, there's a little drop down. You can get that drop down all the way to Cody in Santa Barbara. It says host next to his name. And if you shoot that question over to him, he'll make sure it gets to me and I'll make sure that I ask it. We're going to spend, almost the next hour talking about what, Grace's experience was and trying to get through a lot of the questions about the program. I do want to highlight that next week we are going to have another Zoom where I am mostly going to talk about any program alterations that we are going to have for this coming year because of COVID-19 that we're just planning for. So if you have any questions around that, I'm going to respectfully ask that we defer those to next week, and we will send out another Zoom link on Monday so all of you can ask those questions, because that's what our world has been for the past month or so. So I'm sure that a lot of you have those on your mind as well. So that's what I have for now. I'll get started, and if I could ask Grace and Deb, do you two want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah. So I was in cohort 14. I just finished doing Year On. I'm from Colorado. I decided I want to take a gap year. Mainly, I don't know, I kind of always knew that I wanted to, and I wanted to travel and explore a little bit before I go into the college process. And it was generally just a very amazing experience, and I am infinitely grateful that I did it. So.
And I'm Deb, and we are a study in genetics. So I actually am her mother, in spite of the fact that she has blue eyes, red hair, and I look nothing like her. She actually is my child. She is my younger child. My older son is 22, and I guess my conclusion at the end of this is I would say I wish my son had done it too. I think it has been such a great experience, and he wishes that he had done it as well. So it's really been, what we imagined it might be. It was both different and everything we hoped for, and even more than we could have imagined. I mean, it was difficult to know really what to imagine, but I also think that the experience is as much about a gap year for a parent in the transition between your child as your child and your child becoming an adult, and how we grow into this adult relationship with our child and really let go and sort of change the parameters of the relationship. So it was a great experience in that way as well. And I also live in Colorado, obviously, since we're sequestered together. So
I love that. Thank you. Grace, start us off. Where did you do your service learning project, and what did you do?
So I was a teacher in Bali. I taught 2 classes. They were both ages 8 to 11. Literally the cutest kids in the world. They were a little bit difficult to teach for a little bit, but I had a co-teacher. Her name was Joanna. She was from Germany. She was amazing, and the students were overall amazing, and I had just an infinite amount of fun teaching them, and they had so much cuteness, just little bundled up. It was great.
And when she left and said she was going to teach, she said, Mom, I don't know how to teach. I said, I think that's the point, right? Like, I think you're not supposed to know how to do this yet. So it was it's really a big, huge leap of faith. And in her confidence went from the moment where she said, I don't know how to do this, to 2 days in, this is the greatest thing. And I've really been, I really am figuring this out. And it really it happened quite quickly. There's a fair amount of support in order for that transition to occur without us as parents having to do anything, which was great.
Cool. And Grace, is teaching the only thing that you can do in Bali?
No, so there's two sides of the volunteering. You can either be a teacher or you can be on the marine conservation. Marine conservation, you build these structures to put in the water that acts like coral. So you're working with cement, I think 1 or 2 days a week, and then you actually go on dives to put those structures into the water. It's, from the people that I know that did it, it's a lot of heavy lifting, but it's super cool, and you get to be really close with the fishermen there as the locals. Like, those are your kind of locals that you're around. When we're around the students and the parents, they're more around the fishermen, which is super cool. I built a structure at one point in time, and it's kind of fun just whacking around wet cement for a little bit. It's fun. So yeah.
I love it. And so, what did you do in your free time? Is there time for you to be able to explore Bali? Is there time to go around the island, or are you, hunkered down and you can't leave?
So the cool thing about Volunteer in Bali, which is kind of the program that was like in Bali, the whole structure there, is it is very lenient, but so you have so much freedom. So other than teaching, which was 2 to 5 for me every day, that was it. It was just 2 to 5. You could really do whatever you want as long as you were there for your assignment. So on the weekends, we would go travel Indonesia, my friends and I, which you coordinated and you set up by yourself. So I went to probably a different city almost every weekend, and there's touristy cities, and then you can go to different islands, and it's shockingly cheap. It sounds like a lot, but to get around Indonesia really isn't that expensive. But it was definitely cool getting to explore different islands and see kind of the touristy part as well as the rural part of the island.
And as parents, you get a lot of great pictures, and you start to think, I think I need a gap year because this looks amazing. So she was really good about sending pictures, and they were able to do that pretty easily. I wasn't sure about communication, but it worked really well. So I was jealous the whole time.
That's great. And John, you asked a question about what kind of education group they're embedded with. And I think it's probably good for me to take a step back and explain how Year-On partners with all of our international partners. And if you need clarification here, I'm happy to keep going. But I think this might be what you're asking. So Year-On has 5 international locations. Indonesia is one of them. But in all of our locations, we partner directly with nonprofits and NGOs on the ground. And from there, then they are the ones that find the actual projects that students will work on. So something that we want to be really conscious of is that we are not going in and telling communities what they should be working on. We want the NGOs and nonprofits in those locations to be telling us what they need support on. So we're trying to steer clear of all volunteerism. So, for Grace, for the particular organization that Grace was working with, like she mentioned, their organization concentrates on education and then marine conservation, and then students, you get to choose which part you would like to do. And like Grace mentioned, I think that sometimes people kind of, do a little back and forth, but what we're trying to look for is that you are doing a long-term project for the 10 weeks that you are stationed in your volunteer project. Just John, a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. Is that closer to, okay, cool. Great. And we have a question from Julie. She wants to know, how big was your group, Grace, and did you feel safe when you were traveling with them?
So the Year-On group, there were 10 people in Bali. But the cool thing about like being in the village was for all volunteers. So there were I saw probably over 100-ish volunteers like come and go in the 10 weeks I was there. So there again were people from Germany, Peru, Mexico, like literally all over. And you could coordinate your weekends with them if you wanted, which I did occasionally, but usually I did the year-on group. And I felt perfectly safe traveling with all of them. It is pretty independent, but if you trust the people you're with enough and trust yourself enough to travel in those situations, that's definitely ideal.
Cool.
And Grace's stepdad is a martial artist, and before he left, he talked to her about sort of the most important thing about being safe is paying attention. And this is true whether you're walking to downtown Littleton or you're walking in Bali or you're in a strange airport or whatever, that attentiveness and being able to pay attention. So I think Grace had a fair amount of understanding of awareness and just watching out for what she was doing and observing the world around her. And I think that was, she was actually very good at doing that. And I think that made me feel a lot safer knowing that she understood the importance of paying attention.
Yeah, and I think that something that is great is we want to make sure that students are paying attention. It's one of those things we always say. We know that you're in a different country, there are different customs. Make sure that you have your head on straight at all times. A layer that we put on top of that is a part of our agreement with all of our partners that are abroad. They are responsible for student security. And a lot of the organizations that we partner with, we are partnering with, and they're in some rural parts. Grace, is it 2.5 hours? Remind me how far exactly VIB was from Ubud.
Can I even remember? I think
it's just
from Ubud it was 2.5 hours. From Denpasar, which is the airport, it was 4 hours.
Okay, yeah, so it's pretty remote. So they are, they are in a village, and there's a chief of the village, and he's making sure that all the students and the volunteers, it's not just, again, like Grace mentioned, it's not just year-on volunteers, but there are other volunteers there because it's all in. Their housing is there. That's where they have their meals, and that's the compound that they're living on for those 10 weeks. And I think that that's a good jump off. John also asked Grace, talk to us about the accommodations. What are they like?
They're pretty good. So it is in the middle, like, of nowhere, really. The town is in the middle of nowhere, but it's really, really catered towards tourists. So you have, like, they give you water, they give you fresh water that you can drink. They serve 3 meals a day, and then most rooms have 3 beds in them and some form of storage. There's no AC. It's really hot and there's no AC. They have fans, but the fans aren't necessarily reliable. But it was good enough to get by, and you don't really spend a lot of time just laying in your bed. You're typically out and about doing other things. So.
And when they call home, there are all sorts of interesting noises like geckos and roosters. And I was continuously saying, what is that? What is that? What is that? So it's kind of interesting. It sounds like she's in a totally different place, which
it's loud. There are a lot of animals, and there are always chickens making lots of sound.
And Deb, other than just hearing some of those things when you're on the phone, can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like when you know that your kid is halfway across the world, and you maybe get a call sometime in the day, and just like some of the feelings that kind of come up over the course of 10 weeks when you know that she's in Bali and you're not?
Yeah, well, I will say that the hardest part of the whole thing was when she got on the plane from San Francisco and was flying across the ocean, and you look at the map and there's one piece of land, and then there is this gigantic waterway, and you are completely disconnected for that period of time. You can log on and watch the plane, but other than that, you're really like, your child is somewhere far, far away. So I think that was the hardest part. Really just not knowing. She was going into the unknown. We were going into the unknown. And once she was there, I think that there was a fair amount of structure around orientation and her feeling comfortable. I felt really good that we could be in contact. So Charlie in the year-on group was really good about right before we went giving us instructions for how we could message and how we wanted to make sure that she had, internet accessibility. So You are far away, and there's really nothing you can do. She was very sick. The first couple of days, she had a horrible, horrible cold and really didn't feel well. And, you know, as a mother, I mean, I sent her with tea, but, you know, there's really just nothing you can do. So it was, it really is a growing lesson for the parents as well.
Cool. And, you know, Grace, if we take a step back for a second, Katie asked a question around what it felt like knowing that other students in your graduating class before, you know, as a senior, were going into college in the fall and you were taking a gap year. How did you reconcile some of those feelings?
It definitely wasn't easy, especially when I first graduated and all of my friends kind of started picking their classes for the next semester, and I was just kind of sitting at home. But really the second I met the people that I was going to spend my gap year with, all of those feelings went away. It became such a community so fast, and I became so comfortable with the people so fast. It was basically like college, but way cooler because I didn't have to take classes. And I was in Indonesia, in San Francisco, so pretty cool stuff.
So you didn't have to take classes. Year On has the Explore curriculum for Year On is supposed to help you start thinking about who you are. And I know that you had to do some reflections. John asked a little bit about the Year On curriculum. John, to just give you a little bit of structure here. So the way we do this is because, you know, Grace and a lot of the folks that are on this call who are seniors, you know what it's like to be in school for almost your entire life. You're in this hyper-structured environment. And our goal, once you get abroad, is to really kind of shake you from that. We want you to start basically learning how to deal with your off time so you can start to really explore what's important to you. And every single week, we have a start and a finish. So there's a community coordinator that's in each of these locations, and they do a roundup with all of the students on Mondays and then a closeout on Friday. I think that the Bali folks were actually extremely successful in asking the community coordinator there if they could have their closeouts on Thursdays, because a lot of them didn't have volunteering on Friday. So they didn't have a negotiation workshop yet, and they already negotiated to have that 3-day weekend, which was good for them. But we have basically the start and the finish, which is usually a theme on the week. And then there's some kind of prompt that they are reflecting on. And that curriculum is kind of brought through, and there's more of a group discussion, but it's not supposed to be, you know, heavy coursework that they're working on. And at the same time, they're starting to build rapport with their coaches. And maybe, Grace, you could talk about what it was like to work with your coach and how that started out for the 3 sessions in Bali. And then maybe you can actually pause after that, and we can then, when we move to San Francisco, you can talk about how that expands.
Yeah. So my coach, her name's Elizabeth. Well, that's really important, but she's a sweetheart. And the 3 meetings we had in Bali were nice. They were pretty casual. I mean, we were kind of just getting to know each other, talking about similar things. Like we were talking about our siblings and just kind of general things to connect on a more informal basis, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. It was really cool. It was just like a simple conversation, and it was nice to get to know her in that way before I met her in San Francisco.
Cool. Does anyone have any more questions about Explore that we want to that you want to ask? You feel like we haven't, or Grace, am I missing anything?
Not that I can think of.
Anybody? Okay, well, if we do, then we can come back to that. I think that what we'll do is we'll transition a little bit to San Francisco. So, you know, Grace, you were with a group of 10. That wasn't the only group that you then worked with when you got to San Francisco, but talk to us a little bit maybe about what it was like to come back from being abroad. You went home for kind of a Christmas break, if you will, and then you landed in San Francisco in early January. What was that experience like coming back to the States?
Cold. The second I got to San Francisco, I mean, the weather had just changed so dramatically. My body was so confused. But coming home was really nice just for that quick period. I am glad it wasn't for much longer because I did really start to miss the people that I met in Bali and really look forward to seeing them again in San Francisco. It was again, kind of strange to see these people who I only saw in like really tank tops and like at shorts. And then I saw them in San Francisco, and I felt like they just looked different and older, even though it had only been a month. But it was really cool how we managed to kind of keep the community we had formed. So yeah.
That's great. And I think that probably everybody more or less understands the structure of our San Francisco program, but I'm just going to give an overview of that, and then I'm going to have Grace kind of fill in some of the stuff that she experienced while she was there. But if you have some specific questions about San Francisco, throw them in the chat and we'll get to them. So overall, San Francisco is similar to the first phase, is a 10-week phase. Students live downtown. I don't know, Grace, maybe is it a 60-second walk from the WeWork? I don't even know if it's 60 seconds. It's very, very close. Some people, I think Lucy on the call, she once described it as an extension of her room. So like her kitchen and her living room is over at WeWork. But students live very close to the workspace. We have one workshop every single day. Our workshops focus on foundational skills, personal skills, professional skills, everything from like, how do I design my life, to how do I get comfortable with rejection, to how do I write a resume. And then on top of that, we have some programs that we do. Our goal is for students to really start to think about, who they are and what they want to do. So we want them to build a portfolio and just kind of like work on different projects that interest them. So our curriculum is not meant to be area specific. It's more meant to, be a foundational piece for them. We do these things called work sprints, which Grace can talk a little bit about. They are these 48-hour, we call them sprints, where fellows just go all in on something that they're interested in. And we do the first one and it's solo. The second one is in a group. And the third one, we go back to solo. And then on top of that, the fellows are meeting with their coach every single week for an hour. And our coaching is really around, a support. I mean, that's really, if I had to use one word, that's what it is. We have a goal sheet that fellows work on every single week, and it's just a place for them to like get all of their thoughts down, and then for coaches to think to themselves, okay, like how can we help you achieve these things, and how can I get rid of roadblocks? The way we describe coaches a lot of the times is we say to coaches that their fellows are going to be like a direct report for them, as if they were working for you, but you're going to have more of older sibling warmth. So Grace mentioned some of the rapport building that Elizabeth did with her while she was abroad in Bali, and that's for a certain reason. It's not to be like, you got to set these goals, you got to do this, it's just who are you as a person and what do you want to get out of this? But Grace, for the entire time that she was in San Francisco, she's the one that leads those conversations. It's not Elizabeth saying you must. It's the other way around. So that's kind of the overall there. Grace, do you want to talk to us first about what it's like to have a workshop every single morning, and maybe, I don't know, favorite workshop that you went through?
Okay. So workshops were really great because they gave you kind of enough structure to give you something to work on throughout the week, but it was also very self-motivated. So if you didn't want to apply anything, you really wouldn't have to, but having the opportunity to is really, really great. So if we did a resume workshop, which was super cool. And that one was probably my favorite just because it was the most applicable to me at the time. I was writing my resume and trying to build it and make it look nice. And it was just cool to hear actual feedback on your resume and hear, like, it was from, I spaced out.
A recruiter at Microsoft.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a recruiter at Microsoft, and he was really cool. So he just helped say what attracted him to certain resumes and what was not ideal. So that was probably my favorite workshop, I'd say. Yeah.
And
Cool.
I have to say that as an entrepreneur, because that's my thing, is starting business and whatever. It was so fun to have her calling me and saying, okay, Mom, I need to look at your LinkedIn profile. And what do you think about this? And how does this, it just really was, it was so, when I look at my son who's 22 and Grace who's 19, she's leapfrogged over into the real world. And like, what does it feel like to put yourself out there in the real world? Even though she had to explain herself as a student in her experience in Bali using terms and words. It was fun. It was, I liked her workshops a lot.
I love it. Okay, we have a couple of questions here. And so the first one is from Paul Mastrapa. And so you answered what the workshop that you got the most value out of. Talk to us a little bit about how you spend your time with your coach. What's the frequency of that? And then, sorry, reading and talking at the same time. Were the other fellows happy with the value they received from their coaches? Was your coach connected to your areas of interest? So I'll answer that, the last one. The way we match coaches is actually just generally, this is something that we learned about, and with our post surveys that we did, we're thinking about how we might do this differently for this upcoming year. But what we have done in the past is we used to match coaches directly with interests for students. So, I'm interested in software development. So then what happens is you get a software engineer, and then a student gets 3 weeks into our program and they're like, I don't want to be a software engineer. And then they're like, now I want to switch coaches. So instead, we actually we haven't gone down that road ever again, but we're thinking about different ways. There's been, the fellows in this cohort had some pretty interesting ideas on how we might match coaches to fellows, and one of the ways was by their values. If their value sets align, then maybe they'd be an even better fit. But Grace, can you talk to us a little bit about about Elizabeth? Did you feel like she was supportive? I'll put my earmuffs on if you didn't feel that way. But talk to us a little bit about her in general. What kind of support did she give you? Did you just go to her when you needed resume help? What did that look like?
So I loved my coach. Some of my friends didn't love their coaches as much as I loved mine. Elizabeth and I really got along great. So our sessions, like Charlie said, we met once a week. We met at the WeWork usually, and we had the goal sheet, like Charlie said, that she would help me kind of formulate. So if I was kind of stuck and I really didn't know what goals to set for myself for that week, she would really help formulate those. She'd ask me what I'm interested in, what I want to develop on. One of my big goals in San Francisco was to get back into writing, and she kind of helped me establish goals that would create that path. She was super, super helpful, and I think she was really my perfect coach, and she was also my friend. I mean, we really just talked and we got along really well, and we still talk. Every other week we have a call, and it's just great to catch up with her. Like, we really did establish a really cool bond, and I think I'm very grateful for all of her help, for sure.
That's great. John, to answer your question, most coaches are 1-to-1. Grace actually was one of the exceptions that we had, and she was 2-to-1. But we don't go past 2-to-1, and the reason for that is because we want coaches to really be able to focus on the students. We've tried models all the way up to 10-to-1, and it's kind of an overload. We've had full-time people before, and it just becomes more and more difficult to just remember everything that's going on in someone else's life. So we try and keep that ratio as close to 1-to-1 as possible. All right, we have a question from Julie about, did you have any directions or ideas of what you want to go in the third phase before you went, or when you got to San Francisco? I think that this is an interesting question for a couple of reasons. This varies a lot between fellows, and I'll let Grace talk about her experience. I will also say that we are in a very different world this time around, because obviously we had to cancel our program 1 week early because of shelter in place in San Francisco. So fellows actually left exactly 1 week early. It was heartbreaking, but for me, I don't know, Grace, if it was heartbreaking for you. It was heartbreaking for me for sure. But we did our final week online and did our capstone presentations online. I will say that, I make it very clear during orientation and even on day one of Explore, day one of San Francisco, that you're only going to get out of your year what you put into it. And I think that that's just, it's something that always needs to be, you always need to keep that in mind. I think that it's also really okay to switch your mind so many times. That's what your gap year is about. But Grace, can you talk to us a little bit? What was your journey like? Maybe can you start? And if you didn't have any ideas when you started, that's totally okay. But did you have an idea when you started out, when you were like, okay, I'm going to Bali, then I'm going to San Francisco, and then I'm going to X. And then you got into Bali and you're like, now I'm going to do Y. Then you got to San Francisco week 1 and it was Z. Then you got to week 7 and it was A through D. Did you go through that, or were you just like, I got it figured out?
I mean, my idea of it was really just to do an internship for a while. I didn't really have any idea what I wanted that internship to be. And that kind of clicked like 3 weeks into San Francisco, or like 2 weeks maybe. I was like, I don't know what I want my internship to be, and I might need to figure that out right now. So that's kind of what it started out as. And then it transitioned to traveling more, and living with my boyfriend, just him and I. And then that transitioned, or I was going to do that and then get an internship over the summer, because most internships are based around the summer. So like in that third phase, for the internships I was interested in, I didn't really find any that started then, but I found a lot that started in like June or July. So I was going to travel, go to Canada, spend a few months there, and then come home and do an internship from home. Was my original plan. I don't know what I'm going to do now, so.
And I would say from my perspective, you know, talking to her every week or whatever, that it did morph in that way. Like it started out kind of this broad, like I like to write. Well, that's good. That's, you know, there's a lot of things that require writing. And then, but as she worked with her coach and as she did more of the workshop, she started having, I don't know, more sparks of ideas and different thoughts about what she could do, and met some really interesting people. They did a lot with networking and connections with people who might, you know, have information about areas you were interested in. Mm-hmm. So it really did. Before she got to the travel part, she also got a little bit more narrow and then a little bit more broad. And so it was a really good thinking process, I think.
And just to talk about that third phase a little bit, Grace mentioned it very briefly, but our coaches still meet with our fellows throughout the third phase, no matter what it is that they are doing. So Elizabeth and Grace still meet every other week to kind of have those check-ins, and if they want to still use the goal sheets. But it's really not supposed to be, you know, you leave San Francisco and then it's, you know, see ya. It's supposed to be a way for us to scaffold in, and hopefully it becomes a lifelong relationship, which it sounds like for you, Grace, and that might be the case. All right, Katie, did you defer your college acceptance and or apply to college during your gap year?
I deferred admission, and it was a good choice for me. I think it was definitely the right choice. So.
And during the time that she deferred admission, so the literature, the gap idea was totally her idea. She decided when she was 14, started researching programs. I really had almost nothing to do with it until she said, Mom, I think I want to do this. So I think that's probably an unusual experience, but she, when we started looking into gap years and what that meant, what we found is that a lot of the colleges are really starting to give preferential treatment. Like they're really counting that as a huge advantage, because the lived experience has such a transformative effect, which, you know, I understood that cognitively, but I didn't really understand what that really meant in terms of like her maturity and how much she was going to mature in that short period of time, in terms of her self-confidence, her belief in herself, her orientation to the world, her understanding of her as a part of a much bigger world just really transformed. And while she was gone, her college basically gave her, you know, they reviewed her transcript and saw that she went on a gap year and why she deferred admission, and they gave her a pretty big scholarship just on the basis of that, as far as we can tell, which is also very interesting and quite surprising.
Yeah, and I, you know, I think that this is one of those topics that I could talk about for a very long time. Different colleges view this differently. As some of you might know, Year On is an accredited member of the Gap Year Association, which means that we went through an entire accreditation process to make sure that our risk management protocols are in place, that we have a curriculum that's benefiting students. And one of the big things that we've been talking about on our calls as of late is how universities are currently dealing with deferral processes, because a lot of students are saying that they do not want to go to school in the fall because it will be 100% virtual potentially, and they would like to know what it will look like if they can defer. And we've heard just some real mixed reviews just around what that is looking like now. And a lot of schools are saying, you know, please don't tell us that it's COVID related because we might not approve it. So this is one of those like very bespoke school by school cases that I would, you know, if you are thinking about, like, if you have not put any deferral yet, I would try and chat with someone on the phone before you get something in writing, or you can contact us. We have a lot of experience in doing this with universities. I think that what I can do is I can pop our deferral letter that we have and our deferral guide in the chat, in the Zoom chat, so all of you can see what that looks like. So I would just keep that in mind. Some schools are great about students taking gap years, some not so much. I think, again, we live in a very weird world right now in terms of higher ed and how schools are looking at deferral processes about students taking gap years. It's affected us with our fellows and how they go into the third phase, but it's also affecting students who are leaving, leaving their senior year in high school and then going into college. Quickly, Grace, you want to tell us where you're going in September?
I'm going to University of Portland.
Cool, congratulations. Someone asked, would you recommend reapplying during your gap year? So one of the things is we have a college counselor on staff that is available to work with all students while they are in the year-on program. I think we had 4 out of the 20 that we just had work with that counselor. I know that because I get the bills. We've had, it's been a whole bunch of different cases. We've had people who were like extremely motivated in the beginning of the year to apply, early decision or even regular decision. We've had some folks in our program who actually went to college and dropped out after a semester or after a year. And they are, they say, I don't want to go back to school. And then they do their gap year and they realize that actually, I was interested in A, now I'm interested in B, and that actually is more in line with going to university. So, they have reapplied. So it's definitely possible to apply for college during your gap year. Something that we just like to advise students about doing that is, it is really difficult to recreate the community of people that is doing the same thing as you in your senior year. When you are a senior in high school, most likely almost everyone around you is applying for college, and you are reminded of it over and over every day. Did you do this? Did you do that? Your guidance counselor, your parents, your friends, your grandma, everybody's asking you about college stuff. You get into your gap year, people aren't doing that anymore. It's more difficult to be able to reach out to your teachers and ask for letters of recommendation, to go to your high school registrar's office. There's just a lot more friction. That doesn't mean that it's impossible by any means, but it takes a lot more dedication on your end. And like I said, we've had students that have been able to do it, a fifth of our class was able to do it for this last round. So it is possible, but it's always something that preparation is really important. So we try and make sure that you're getting those things together. And again, if this is something that you highlight for us, we have kind of a step-by-step of things that you can follow. Grace, Julie wants to know, do you feel the program would be as beneficial without the international experience? And maybe for some color here for folks who are thinking about this right now, we are currently looking at what it looks like if come this fall we cannot travel internationally because of COVID, and we do domestic volunteer programs instead.
So I'm not sure. So I think the travel part was very important to the whole gap year for me. Maybe doing it domestically I don't know if it would necessarily be the same experience or a similar one, but the international experience was definitely very important to me. It's also very helpful in terms of establishing relationships with the other fellows in the cohort. That's kind of what I noticed, but I think it was pretty important to my experience for sure.
Cool. Other questions? Grace, am I missing anything about San Francisco? Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work sprints that you did?
Yeah. So the first work sprint was kind of inspired by my writing. So I just actually wrote something, which I hadn't done in a very long time, so that felt nice. And then I also curated it with a playlist because I felt like it. The cool thing about work sprints and the intimidating thing about work sprints is they're very broad. So you can really do just about anything you want if you can apply it to working really hard. So there were people who designed logos, and there were people who drew and created websites, and it was just this super cool broad thing. And then my second work sprint I did with 2 of my friends. we made a clothing company, and one of my friends designed the website and the logo, and then my other friend helped me design the clothes. So we like embroidered hoodies and painted jeans and just kind of made a cute little website that we never actually launched. And then my last work sprint, I just took a marketing class online on Coursera that was supposed to take me like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something. I just took it in 48 hours. So there's a lot of information.
And Grace, do people usually just do creative things, or when you say open, what does that mean? Do you have other examples of what people worked on?
Yes, somewhere. So I know there was a lot of technology. A group tried to make a Twitter bot at one point. I don't think that was successful. But they did a really cool thing. And then there was some programming related things. It's really, really you can do whatever you want for the work sprints as long as you feel like it will take motivation from yourself and like you can work on it. And it's something you sit down and you work on and you're proud of at the end.
Cool. Yeah. And I think that just, some of the work sprints, it really varies. Like Grace said, she built a clothing company in one, she took a marketing course in the other, she did, a whole writing sample that she attached a Spotify playlist to. Fellows will do a whole bunch of things. They'll teach themselves, someone that helped with the logos in her second work sprint. For his first work sprint, he went and did a whole bunch of designs online and got bids on them on whether or not like somebody wanted to use that as their logo for their company. There's people who have done, like, I want to learn how to do animation. So they start off with drawing. We had, there was a group work sprint where I think it was a photographer, a writer, and a painter got together, and they brought a whole bunch of people into WeWork, and they did this like huge expose on like what it's like to be an artist. There was someone in cohort 14 who was a aspiring comedian, or he is a comedian. And he was making sure that every day he was going out and getting rejected and trying to go to clubs and, do these comedy sets. I think that at the end of the day, what we're really looking at is like, what is this deliberate practice that you can be doing for like a period of time? And, we have this ethos that like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, but you have to be doing something. And that's what's important about this time. Because as we know, it's easy to just kind of get lost in the infinite, I should now say TikTok scroll, not Instagram scroll. Mm-hmm. All right. Katie wants to know, how are you keeping yourself motivated during the launch phase? That's a big question.
Yeah. I don't know if motivated is a great word. It's hard for me because I did apply to a bunch of remote internships. So internships I could just do from home. I got rejected from all of them, or they didn't answer me. So I don't really have anything to be motivated to do right now. I'm trying to keep my brain working before college. But other than that, I'm kind of letting myself relax. I wish I could be motivating myself to do something during the launch phase, but it's been kind of a struggle to figure out exactly what that could be.
Yeah, I think that most people, if it's any consolation, are in the same boat. I think that it's really hard right now. And Julie, maybe this answers a little bit of your question. I think that a lot of fellows right now, because of the way, the abruptness of the way the second phase ended, right now it's just kind of like this overall like, oh man, this is a hard spot to be in. A lot of companies are furloughed or shut down. We know people, we have friends and family members that have all been laid off of their jobs just because of what's going on in the global environment. We're trying to keep the tenor light, I think, with Year On. We still want people to be meeting with their coaches and using that as a support system. We run our what we call Friday Reviews, which are this community building hour that we do almost every Friday while we're in San Francisco. We're still doing that virtually. Lucy, who's one of our community coordinators that's on the call, she's running trivia every single Tuesday night. So we still have a couple of things that we're trying to make sure that we keep it light, but we also understand that this is also a time that, for a lot of us, we're not supposed to be in hyperactive drive. We're dealing with something that is something that we've never dealt with before. And it's an okay time to just be kind to yourself and make sure that you're putting one foot in front of the other. And like Grace said, well, I'm just like trying to keep my brain sharp so I'm ready for college in September. And that's, it's also a gargantuan task right now. Grace, am I missing anything about San Francisco?
I mean, I think that's pretty good. I think we covered, things I can think of.
Deb, anything that you want to add?
Well, I'd answer Julie's question about friends doing projects in the third phase. One of her friends is still doing 99 Design, so putting his artwork out on there and being able to figure out how to do that, which I think is really cool, and still doing projects. I think the relationships that when Grace came home from Bali and I picked her up in San Francisco, I asked her, what do you think is most different about you from having gone this? And she said to me, I like myself better, which, that right there was worth writing the check. I mean, especially for adolescent girls, I think we have a pretty cruel society in a lot of ways. There's an incredible amount of pressures and these ideas of, what you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to be, and just removing herself in this completely different place, going to a different part of the world, and also being with other people who are in this complete unknown space. Yet, unlike college where there's like a whole bunch of you, there was this group of people who really survived together in this really, like, they were all equally clueless. And I don't know what that would look like if it were domestic, but I would imagine they would still be a small group and still equally clueless and really needing to connect with each other in these different ways that high school doesn't allow you to have those kinds of boundaryless decisions about how you develop friendships with people. So that was really, really cool. And also watching how her friends developed over the time. I went out to San Francisco to visit her, and we had brunch with several of her friends. And we asked them kind of what Bali versus San Francisco, what their experiences were. It was just absolutely fascinating to see how different people's perspectives were, the lenses that they looked at the world through, how they shared information and stayed connected. And it was really, I think that these are the most inspiring friendships she's had. She has spent a fair amount of time making love boxes for her. They had to end early. We stuck her on a plane and flew her home. So they didn't really get to say goodbye. They didn't get to do a lot of things. I think that was really hard. So she spent a fair amount of time staying connected with these people. They're all still on chat together, and they have, all sorts of groups. And I know she talks to Lucy and she talks to Elizabeth, and it really has been I think, a healthy group of relationships that have connected her to the world in a really cool way.
I love that. Thank you. A couple more questions here as we wrap up. Grace, did you get to travel at all around SF, around the Bay?
A little bit. I liked walking. That was kind of my thing. I just liked going on walks, people watching, very interesting stuff.
I vaguely remember you saying you did some neighborhood hopping.
Mm-hmm. And then one time I accidentally walked to the Golden Gate Bridge, which was like a 45-minute walk, and it was a complete accident. It was great. Yeah.
I love it. We have another question here. Did your time in San Francisco help you figure out what specific careers you might enjoy that would leverage your writing?
Yeah. So it wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, but it was a lot more helpful because it was so general. There was kind of this push, like I had this own, I really wanted to push myself to figure out what I would enjoy doing, and my coach actually helped me a lot. She kind of guided me towards the marketing path. Just because I kind of like working with numbers and I kind of like working with psychology. And then I had enough time to just write kind of in my free time, just do what I wanted to do. That was it was really just like my biggest hobby, I would say. Self-improvement hobby, I guess. But yeah, I definitely had plenty of time to do that and figure that out. So
that's cool. And were you able, while you were in San Francisco, to chat with anybody that is in any of the fields that you're interested in?
Yeah. So my coach actually had some super cool connections. So I for a little bit was looking at working for Spotify. So I talked to somebody who actually works in the sales department for Spotify, and that was like the most interesting call I've ever had in my entire life. And then I talked to the marketing manager at the place where my coach worked, and she was also great and had this plethora of information that was, again, very, very interesting to learn about.
Awesome. All right, we're coming up right here at the hour. Do we have any final questions that we want to get? Are we good? All right, well, cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining tonight. Grace, Deb, thanks so much for answering everybody's questions. We appreciate it. I hope everybody's staying safe, staying well. We are going to try and host another one of these next week when we can talk a little bit more about the program structure and what it's going to look like this fall and some of the things that we're cooking up. We're pretty excited about a lot of the things that we've been working on, and in light of everything that's been happening in the world. But I appreciate everybody taking some time today. Thanks so much for joining. Again, Grace and Deb, thanks so much. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really, thank you so much for doing that.